Shalom Chaverim, I'm Stephen Ben-Nun. You guys are watching Israeli News Live, but don't think that takes any announcement for you guys to be aware of that. And yes, coming in a little bit late this evening, Ariel ended up back in the hospital tonight. She's been suffering a lot of abdominal pain. She's been vomiting, not constantly. The first day on Wednesday last week when she went to the hospital, they released her. They believed it was a virus. They did say they wanted to watch closely. They did not think that she had appendicitis. Started again today, and we went back. Doctors still believe that it's a very severe case of a virus that she's suffering with. And but they are watching very closely, and they're wanting to also do ultrasound. They did allow her to go home. One doctor didn't really want to, but the other doctor, the pediatrician that came on board, said that she felt like that she could go. She wasn't she wasn't dehydrated, so therefore she would be safe enough to come back home with us tonight, which Ariella didn't want to stay at the hospital either. So anyway, do pray for her. It's a very tough situation right now. And, you know, there's something I want to just speak to you guys about this evening. And those of you, I don't know how many from Israeli News Live joined us on the on our Shabbat live broadcast on Danun Institute. But that's the kind of the way we're going right now. We're just kind of testing the waters because we have looked for a time that would work for people around the world. We have one sister that was getting up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning just to be able to catch Israeli News Live from Australia. That's why we changed our time to 11 p.m. I think that makes it around 7 a.m. Australian time. And when I say 11 p.m., that's here in the Czech Republic, midnight in Israel, United States. It is actually 5 p.m. Eastern, and so on and so forth around the country, where depending on where you are in the world, just so many people from around the world that are viewing in. And with YouTube not being the best in the world about sending notifications that we're on running live here, we decided to set a time for the news broadcast, and that'll pretty much run from Saturday night, like we are right now, all the way up until Thursday, and then of course Friday night at 11 p.m. we're on Danun Institute live for our Shabbat live broadcast, where we get into more just biblical teachings and going back to the very program that I started a long time ago. And I have to really give Jason Egroff credit for that, because he's the one that kind of encouraged me to go that route. And actually, it's where the name came from. He was the original one to air Shabbat Live on his program. I don't think Jason runs that any longer, but anyway, so we're back up and running with Shabbat Live every Friday night, 11 p.m. in Prague, 5 p.m. Eastern time, and of course, however that works into the time schedules around the world for you guys. And then also on Patreon. And speaking of Patreon, tonight, some of the things I'm going to be talking about, I do feel I'm going to probably end up doing another video for Patreon on this issue as well. I was in prayer today in fact, it's probably a couple hours before, next thing I know, our daughter has to end up going back to the hospital. But I was outside and I'd been praying about this whole situation that's happening in the world and asking the Lord to try to better understand what's going on. And I realize Israeli News Live has many, many viewers from all over the world with every kind of background you can imagine. We have Arabic believers, we have Jewish believers, we have Christians in every walk of life in Christianity as well. But then we have some people that are just they don't have any persuasion of any sort whatsoever, but they tune in. And they appreciate what we do from a news platform. But I also, though, some people don't appreciate the fact we throw in the biblical insight here. But this is a really, really serious issue that we're dealing with. I brought up a couple of little news articles here just to get started with, and this is on RT. Ignore, deny, downplay accounts of Syrians from Duma have no place in Western narrative. The U.S. is just totally ignoring the evidence that Russia has been able to gather, especially from the citizens that are there, journalists from around the world, even renowned journalists, such as the journalist from Germany that just went to Duma and covered that and came back believing that the whole event was staged. Now he has become a laughing stock to Western media, a man that has really had a reputation, and that's Mr. Fisk. So we're seeing these things. Now we have Armenia, the protests that are going on there, and I see the State Department in the U.S. is making comments like, we hope that they're going to honor the Constitution and but friends, I just have to tell you, I'm very concerned anytime now that I see the U.S. getting involved in whether it be statements or whatever of things that are happening around the world, because to me it's like we're probably much more involved in these situations in other countries than what we realize. We're just being duped. We're being played. The American public is being played by the media. We're being played by our governments. The United States was involved in Syria from the very beginning. We were very much involved in the Maidan coup that happened in Ukraine, which, speaking of Ukraine, let me see if I even have this up. I don't know if I have this. No, I don't have it up right now. But in Ukraine, let me pull up Michael D. Michael is pretty much on top of these things here. There have been more Ukrainian soldiers wounded, the battles that are happening over there. It is, 3 Ukrainian soldiers were wounded in action yesterday in Donbass. I'll have to share something with you too. I was actually at a military drill that was going on. It's actually a reenactment. I'm going to share some of that with you guys probably tomorrow. I think it'd be a blessing to you. That was happening here in Europe. I kind of think they use these scenarios to practice their own combat skills as well. But we see this going on. We know that the U.S. is heavily involved in that. And besides that, we know that the Syria situation, that the U.S. has been involved in arming not only the Free Syrian Army, but we've been involved in arming and supplying weapons to the terrorists, Al-Qaeda, al-Nusra, and even Donald Trump says we formed ISIS. Now that was when he was running for president. I doubt he would say that now, but that's the way it goes. But let's just stop just for a minute, guys, and just back up for just a second. What's troubling me is what I shared with you guys the other day from Jude. And as I was praying about this today, some more scriptures began to come to my heart. And by the way, I do want to thank, we have several people that have volunteered to be moderators, Christine, Jennifer, Thor as well. The only thing is I haven't got Brother Thor in as of yet. I needed his YouTube name, or maybe I did. I don't want to remember now. Just want to thank them for helping us as far as in moderating our comments that are happening. And we have to do this because sometimes you get people that just some vulgar things come in there. And I'm just not able to see those things that are going on. And, I don't have so much trouble when someone disagrees with me, especially if it's done in a respectful way. But when you have people just trolling, and of course the real evil part that's going on, some filthy things that can be put out there, or someone attacking someone else. These are what our moderators are for, is to help keep those type of situations down to where people that come in can have a pleasant time. And so I really want to thank these two sisters that are here tonight that are doing that for us. God bless them for this effort. This is tough, especially when the numbers really get moving along in here. All right, getting back though, what we're looking at here, Jude has really been bothering me because of what Jude said, especially when he says, "Beloved, when I gave all diligence to write unto you the common salvation, it was needful for me to write unto you and exhort you that you should earnestly contend for the faith which was once delivered unto the saints." So it's not just a common salvation that he was pointing at, but he really wanted you to contend for that original faith delivered unto the saints, all right? Which is, the word in there is blameless ones, okay? He says, "For therefore certain men have crept in unawares, who were before of old ordained to this condemnation." Now, I got into this with you guys already. I've put this video up on Israeli News Live, to Noon Institute. Patreon has a little bit more information in there. Not as much as what I'm going to be getting into, especially after some of the things that the Lord has laid on my heart today. Again, I'm going to be very cautious in how I say the things that I'm going to say here, but yeah, you have to really stop for a moment though and look at what Jude is saying. When David was here on the earth, when Saul, before David, was king on the earth, when Moses was here, when Joshua was here, and we can even say Ishmael's children, and even Esau's children. If you go back and look at the biblical record, you remember when God, let me just stop for a moment. I'm wanting to take you through some things that the Lord has shown me. So I don't want to lose you in a rabbit trail that I'm going to do here. So I'm going to try to make sure I'm very clear and concise about this information. Because in praying about this, I'm trying to understand what's going on in the Middle East. All right, so what I'm about to tell you actually relates to the Middle East as well. The very things that are happening now. So let's keep that perspective in mind. So what I want to do first, though, is I want to set a stage for you. When the children of Israel came out of Egypt, and Jude brings this out, they came out as a mixed multitude. 40 years they wandered in the wilderness. And through the trials and testings, God weeded out those ones that did not believe. Now, from what Jude is clearly identifying here, these were Nephilim as well, because it was a mixed multitude that came out of Egypt. When Joshua, though, came, for example, when he came to the land of Israel, and God had told Moses before Joshua takes over, "I've given you this land of the Canaanite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, etc., the Jebusites, and you are going to drive them out. Land is being given to you." The 10 spies go down, and what do the 10 spies run into? Giants. All right? And they said, "We look like grasshoppers next to these guys." And they were afraid. But Joshua and Caleb, when they come back, 2 of the spies out of the 10, they said, "No, we're more than able to take the land." They weren't afraid, even though they were giants. All right? Because some people today, they kind of play down on Ishmael's descendants because of the Arabs today. Well, if you remember, when God had Moses was still there, God says to Moses, "Do not war with the children of Ammon, for I have given them this land, and I will not give it unto you." He said, "I give it to them for an inheritance." And then what did God also say? "For they warred against the Zamzamim," also the giants, the Nephilim, children of the fallen angels. Now, some might say, "Well, no, brother, no. All the Nephilim were destroyed at the antediluvian destruction during the time of the flood. Noah came over, and it was only him and his family. Nobody else." Okay, I'll agree with that. But then how do we get giants on this side of the boat? All right. This side of the boat ride, now we got giants all of a sudden back again. Well, Scripture tells us, we can go back. We can look at the Rephaim. Enoch was, if we remember correctly, Enoch has no descent of parents other than, I think it'll tell you like his father and maybe his grandfather, and that's it. No other genealogy. But then we find those little key verses in there where it speaks about how that they were passing their seed through to Molech. All right. Now, I know this is controversial. All right. And understand, if nothing else, just take it as a conjecture right now. Let's just look at this as a discussion because I'm really troubled about what's happening in the world. Now, God then sends Joshua in with the children of Israel, and they're to drive out the occupants. All right. It's been a war against the fallen angels and their children, and them constantly getting these children back on this earth almost since the beginning of time, or since the beginning of the time the fallen angels came in. Now, this is what Jude brings out when he, like verse 4, for there are certain men crept in unawares who were before of old ordained to this condemnation. In other words, these men are relatives to the very ones that have been condemned before of ancient times. All right, so they're children of the Nephilim, or children of the fallen angels, you might say. Now, a lot of people are not going to, they're like, wow, this is kind of crazy. But when you read everything that we saw in Jude here, this is exactly what Jude is talking about. Okay, well, David comes along long after Joshua, and they're still warring against the giants. That's how David's ministry began, was killing Goliath. And the Gadites were, not Gadites, but the Goliath, where he was from, that was a completely different set of giants. You had the Rephaim, you had those people there where Goliath was from. But what I'm getting at here is in those biblical times, the children of the fallen angels were always able to be identified because of their stature, giants. But it wasn't always giants by the time David gets here. Now, during the time of Joshua, the land was full of giants. But when you get to David, you just have one here and there. It seems like, especially in the case of verse 4 here, they crept in unawares. No one realized they were creeping in. Why? Because they weren't coming in as giants anymore. Okay? And that's what's troubling. Now, let's look at a couple other things. And I'm going to go into some issues here I wanted to share with you. I will therefore put you in remembrance that you once knew this, that the Lord, having saved the people of the land of Egypt, afterward destroyed them that believed not. Why? They were also those children. And the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved for the everlasting chains under the darkness of the judgment of the great day. All right? Sodom and Gomorrah, what were they doing? Going after strange flesh. All these issues are happening. This was one that got me too, and I didn't put this up the other day. Likewise, also these filthy dreamers, or dreamers, doesn't see the word filthy is added there, defile the flesh, despise dominion, and speak evil of dignities. Isn't it interesting that the Vatican has this big push for the children of what they call the dreamers? Now, I realize what they're saying. They also have a dream of having a future. But they're saying to America, let these children in. Could there be something more about these children that meets the eye? I don't know. Just a thought, right? Michael Archangel, when contending with the devil, he disputed about the body of Moses. Why? Well, it also says they despise dominion and speak evil of the dignities, which is not public leaders, it's the glorious ones, which I believe are the two witnesses. Now, I say all this because you remember when Elijah was here, and Ahab sent out the soldiers to go have Elijah come down. And it was also during a time of the famine, the tribulation period of those days there. And Elijah calls fire down out of heaven, consumes these men, much like the gift we see of Revelation 11 of the two witnesses, right? But when Yeshua came on the scene, his apostles were saying similar things like that. Lord, should we call fire down out of heaven to deal with these guys? Peter takes his sword out when they're coming to take Yeshua away, and he cuts off the high priest's servant's ear. And the Lord says, don't do that, Peter. Put your sword away. But the guys that want to call the fire down out of heaven, he says, you don't know what spirit you're of. You see, something changed when Jesus came, and it was no longer like it was during the times of David, Joshua, during the times of Caleb, during the times of Saul. You see, back then, it seems to be that God was using the children of God to war against this ungodly move. You remember how he mentions the time of Egypt, right? He also will talk about Korah and Dathan, how they led them astray. And it used to kind of bug me. Why would God send the children of Israel to go through the camp and kill all these people? Are they not Israelites as well? But there's a lot of weird things that happened in Egypt. In fact, to this day, their temples are studied like you would not believe. And the Vatican has a lot to do with those studies as well. They're trying to unlock those secrets. I believe they already have. Hitler was trying to unlock those secrets as well. And I believe that he was successful. Now, the thing is, if they were creeping in unaware back then, what about today? All right. Now, somewhere, I don't remember where this is in the Bible, but there's a Bible verse, and I know I'm not quoting it just right. There will come a time where they will think they do God's service by killing you. I think we're at that stage already. But here's what's happening. The evil group are the ones that are warring in the Middle East. But instead of trying to rid the earth of this Nephilim race that continues to plague this planet, they're trying to kill the true believers. I say this as I'm saying this, and this is one reason why I need to really do an in-depth video, not on a live broadcast, but really break this down for you guys. I'm just kind of like, I'm sharing with you something that's just on my heart that I haven't really had the time to sit down and prayerfully go through each of this, search it out. I'm just kind of sharing it with you as it is being revealed to my heart today. When Jesus came on the scene, though, one of the things that he says here in the parable in Matthew chapter 13, he gives the parable of the sower. He said, the servants of the householder came and, let me back up just a little bit. Another parable put he forth unto them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man which sowed good seed in his field, which is Christ. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went his way. That's interesting. The sowing also represents birthing of children. The men in this case here are the apostles. And while they slept, the enemy has come down, and now he has sowed tares among the wheat and went his way. I think this has a lot to do with these demonic beings coming in on this earth. But when the blade was sprung up and brought forth fruit, then appeared the tares also. So the servants of the householder came and said unto him, Sir, didst thou not sow good seed in thy field? And from whence then hath the tares? And he said unto them, An enemy hath done this. The servant said unto him, Wilt thou then that we go and gather them up? But he said, No. Lest while you gather up the tares, you root up also the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. In the time of the harvest will I say to the reapers, Gather you together first the tares, and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. You see, Jesus, when he came on the earth, his spirit had changed from the days of war. And he had a spirit of love. He was not into the doing all the killing of that time. That's why he said to his own apostles, when they said, Should we call fire down like Elijah did? Well, Elijah, there was a purpose for what Elijah was doing. See, just like there was a purpose for what Joshua did, what Caleb did, what David did, what Saul did. All right? But when it come to the time when Christ came on the scene, mercy was extended, and he gives you the parable to show you why. All right? Let them grow together until the harvest. Now, Jude, we know when that harvest is coming, because you remember how the scripture says, I will repay, saith the Lord? You know, vengeance is mine, God says, right? Now see, what else did Jude say? According to Enoch, what? By the way, he says here, these are spots in your feast of charity when they feast with you, feeding themselves without fear. Clouds they are without water, carried about of winds, trees whose fruit withered, without fruit, twice dead, plucked up by the roots. Raging waves of the sea, foaming out their own shame, wandering stars to whom is reserved the blackness of darkness forever. And Enoch also, the seventh from Adam, prophesied of these, saying, Behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000 of his saints, to execute judgment upon all, and to convince all that are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds, which they have ungodly committed, and all of their hard speeches which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. All right? So there comes a time where this will be dealt with, but it's not our place to be doing it ourselves. Okay? Let's look at Matthew 23. Again, this is Yeshua identifying these serpent race, if you want to call it. Reptilian, I guess, is the better way, because that's what a lot of people call it today that are not even religious. They call it a reptilian race. And again, I can't say that it's that. They're from the fallen angels, is where they're from. Thou blind Pharisees, cleanse first that which is within the cup and the platter, that the outside of them may be clean also. But woe unto you, Pharisees, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like unto whited sepulchres, which indeed appear beautiful outward, but are within full of dead men's bones, and are uncleanliness. Even so you also outwardly appear righteous unto men, but within you are full of hypocrisy and iniquity. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you build the tombs of the prophets and garnish the sepulchres of the righteous. And say, if we had been in the days of our fathers, we would not have been partakers with them in the blood of the prophets. Wherefore you be a witness unto yourselves that you are the children of them which killed the prophets. Fill you up the measure of your fathers. You serpents, you generation of vipers, how can you escape the damnation of hell? That's serious right there. And we begin to take we begin to take what's going on, and we're seeing today what's happening. It is troubling. It is very troubling. And this is why I'm looking at this closer. I'm gonna really get into this much deeper this week here. Tomorrow we'll pick back up on regular news, trying to get more caught up on these things here. But we really are going to go deeper into this. And because there's things that God has revealed to me even besides these things here. It's just, I'm just kind of in awe right now over several issues. So I want to come back to these things again later this week. Let's watch what's happening in the world. The things are not over. I do believe, though, and on Patreon, I will probably go, well, there's no doubt about it, I'll go much deeper on there, exactly who I believe is guilty. Most of you guys know who I believe is guilty about this. But I need to try to see if I can't connect some of the dots behind that. But here's what I will say here. The reason why they're doing the war in Syria, they're trying to wipe out the true believers. That doesn't mean that all the Syrians are true believers. But Satan is determined to try to find all the children. And he doesn't care if he has to kill some of his own to get the good ones. That's where the trouble comes in. And this is exactly what's happening. But is it possible that some of these religious entities out there are so convinced that they're right, that they really believe that they should do like that, like it was in the days of David? See, the problem is they don't, as Jesus says, you don't know what spirit you are of. And in their case there, it's even worse. At least with the apostles, they were still believers. They just didn't recognize the fact that when they were during the time of Christ's life, this was a time of mercy, not of judgment. And yes, at one time God used, like even in the case of Samson, he was born for this purpose. He wasn't no big, giant, muscular guy. Yet he could take down 1,000 Philistines with a dry jawbone of a mule or jawbone of a mule. I don't know if it says it's dry or not, but a jawbone of a mule. Think about those things. Anyway, I'm Stephen Benoon. You're watching Israeli News Live. I'm getting sleepy. I know I guess it's after midnight here. So I think I'm coming down with some kind of a cold myself. I started losing my voice yesterday on our Shabbat Live broadcast there. But look forward to seeing you guys again tomorrow night. And be blessed, all of you. Thank you for coming on. And we'll get some more stuff to share with you. And two, we will run broadcasts sometimes during the daytime as well, because normally when I get up first thing in the morning, I like to see if there's anything breaking going on. I don't get too much into our news that's going on in America because there's so many good people out there that cover what happens in the U.S. I mainly try to focus on Middle Eastern, European, Russian relations, and how things relate to there. Occasionally I get into some U.S. Issues that are happening. I do want to go into this gun issue. I really want to go into that. I'm going to have to do that on Patreon because some of the things I would like to say, I held my peace when this whole issue was happening with the school there because people were getting shut down even temporarily over that. So I kind of held my peace a little bit on that, but I really would like to say what I really think about it. And I can share some things with you that I know personally that could impact how that goes. I'm Stephen Benoon. You're watching Israeli News Live. Shalom. Good evening. Talk to you guys tomorrow.